Yes, they're safe, we're being told by FEMA, but they're there in those areas to make sure they can respond quickly to those places in rural Georgia and in the southeastern part of Georgia as well. And then Friday, the heavy rain is really expected to impact the Carolinas. We know the Carolinas are still dealing with the aftermath of Hurricane Florence. A number of those rivers still have not receded. That's a concern after they crested a couple of weeks ago. And so FEMA says it's ready to respond to those hard-hit areas that will see even more flooding possibly. But as you mentioned, David, it is good news. We can say good news. It's a pro, not a con, that this storm is moving fast, because they're hoping that the storm system moves quickly over those states that are already dealing with all that flooding.
Very interesting, Kenneth. Stay with us if you could, please, just for a few minutes. But I want to bring into the conversation Tom Bossert. He is standing by in our D.C. Bureau. And I gather, Tom, you have had some experience with these kinds of storms. How bad does this look?
Yeah, David, unfortunately that's true. And let me put it in perspective. 20 million people right now are under some watch or warning of some type, either hurricane, flooding, or tornado warning. And so as we watch it, it's sometimes hard to understand how much of the country is really at risk. 20 million people, give or take. And so all the preparedness that we do and all the government actions that we take at various levels of our municipal and federal and state governments are important. But if 20 million people haven't taken some degree of personal accountability and steps on their own, that kind of mass scale event's very difficult to then recover and respond to after the fact.
Very interesting. So are you concerned that not enough people heeded these warnings?
Yeah, to be honest, I really am. A number of things happened here. We've reported it very well all morning. The speed with which this storm materialized and intensified and made landfall, it's moving very, very quickly forward. So I've said this before to people, it's a little bit simple, but think of this storm moving quickly forward, not just the speed that it's moving, wind speed that we talk about, but it's also moving forward in such a way that if you moved your hand through a bathtub, you could imagine a big wave in front of your hand. That's this big storm surge. So we focused on that. But now I think Sam Champion and others have really pointed out to us throughout today's coverage that it's going to continue not just with storm surge, which will kill people, unfortunately, or at least has the potential to, but it'll continue with wind and tornadic events and flooding events all the way up, and to your point, marching across the South. So I'm worried that not everybody in one form or another of risk has heeded the appropriate warnings or had the time to do so. And so I'm looking for and hoping and praying against loss of life.
Our prayers are with yours there. How does this compare with, I mean, it seems like we've seen a couple of devastating hurricane seasons in the past couple of years. Are these things getting worse, or is this just a roll of the dice every year?
Well, boy, I don't know how to develop a large scientific trend here. I can tell you that the last time I served in government recently, we had a big 2017 natural disaster season. Each storm was different, though. Houston had a lot of rain and not a lot of drainage, and so we saw a great deal of flooding with Hurricane Harvey. Slow-moving storm. This is a faster storm, and we're seeing a much different set of dynamics we just discussed. Last time I served in government, a long time ago, in 2003 and 4, I saw 4 category major, 3 and 4 major hurricanes make landfall in the United States in 6 weeks. And so back then we were talking about this being a trend as well. And then we saw a little bit of a lull of hurricane impacts for the 10 years in between. So trend analysis is outside my scope right now, but I can tell you this one's intense. It's unique to this particular area of the world. And I am very, very worried that, think of it this way. Earlier, Sam Champion talked about why this storm is unique from a meteorologist perspective. That's very important. But from an emergency manager's perspective, all the people that may be hunkered down right now that might require assistance after the fact complicate things like the provision of emergency medical services, the distribution of commodities, kind of that retail level distribution of aid and help. And so I'm looking for a very, very difficult, challenging, and frustrating period of weeks ahead.
I know you say that each of these storms is unique, but you hear the statistic there that this is the strongest storm since 1969, the 3rd strongest storm in U.S. history. And I think back to the storms that in my lifetime, one of the big ones that stands out is Hurricane Katrina. Obviously some unusual circumstances there. But if this storm is stronger than Katrina, do we expect damage on that scale?
Yeah, that's a great question, but also a difficult comparison. So the reason I was cautioning that each storm is unique is the speed and the characteristics scientifically don't necessarily equate to human loss of life and human loss of property and so forth. So we've had very, very intense storms hit unpopulated areas and go, almost without warning or without damage. We've had Hurricane Katrina. I was there all through that storm, really weakened to a Category 2 by the time it made landfall. And yet it wreaked damage across the entire Gulf Coast of this country. A lot of that had to do with the brittleness of our infrastructure and our societal kind of dependency in some places that were very poor on government assistance. And so you're going to see some of that happen here, but it'll be a little bit better prepared and a little less brittle. But people are going to be really, really struggling after this one.
All right, Tom Bossert, thank you very much for your perspective there. I want to turn back to the front lines of this storm now, where we've got Maggie Rulli in Panama City, Florida. Maggie, how's it looking where you are?
Well, David, things are just getting worse and worse, if I'm being honest. The wind is picking up, and I'm shocked we just got on air because we lost, I think, 2 cell phone providers, and we finally found one that I'm clutching in my baggie right now because it's all we have left to talk to you. And I'm not sure if you can see it all, if we want to try to widen the camera just a little bit, because we were outside in the thick of it not too long ago, and we keep creeping further and further in. And just right before we spoke, I was standing right here, and there was such a large wind gust, I kind of crouched in the vestibule here, but we are now taking it over, so you might even see people walking back and forth, but everyone's just kind of trying to make it through the brunt of the storm right now. David, we were out here starting at 3 a.m. this morning waiting for this storm, and back then it was fairly quiet. Since then it's just been intensifying, and I would say the past hour, 2 hours, things have gotten crazy. Every minute it seems to pick up, and we've noticed kind of a shift in the wind patterns as well. So right now we seem to be in the middle of it, and we're just waiting to get to the other side at this point.
Wow. Well, keep your phone dry in that plastic baggie and charge up your other phones if you can.
I'm trying.
We appreciate your reporting from there. Thank you so much. Let's turn now to Olivia Lamberson. She's a resident of Port St. Joe in Florida. She joins us by telephone. Olivia, are you there with me?
I am. How are you?
How are you? I gather you've been live streaming from your home. How come you didn't get out?
It's just a little windy out there. I wasn't quite sure what it was with that wind.
How's it been going?
Kind of like they were saying from Panama, the wind has been insane. We're getting more rain now than we got originally, and it definitely has shifted to more of a northern wind and a eastern wind versus toward the east, versus south the way it was before. We have quite a few limbs down in our yard. Some trees are down on power lines in my yard. We have one of our trees is fallen and blocking our cars in, so now we definitely can't go anywhere. We're hanging in there best we can. We lost power probably a couple hours ago. We're just waiting now for the back half of it to blow on through.
You sound extraordinarily calm. I gather this is not your first rodeo. How does this compare with some of the hurricanes you've felt in the past?
It's funny, growing up here in the Gulf Coast, you kind of get used to hurricanes and storms, but no two are ever the same. And being prepared is definitely the best thing you can do, and, making sure you have the proper things, lined up and places to go lined up where if it does get bad. I was actually in Harvey in Houston last year and moved back to St. Joe, Port St. Joe, just a few months ago. And so it's kind of like I'm a magnet for these terrible storms.